All right, the Constitution of the United States. So the Articles of Confederation proved to be very weak. So our founding fathers got together to draft this. And thankfully, they knew what didn't work with the Articles of Confederation. So they had some ideas of how they wanted to fix the Articles. Now, originally, the Congress came back together to change the Articles, but then they realized that it was so bad that they needed to throw out and start fresh. And in doing so, they created a federal system of government based on power shared between the national and state governments. Remember, the Articles had a government where the states had a majority of the power. So the federal system is otherwise known as federalism, and it's where there is a balance between federal powers and state powers. So, for instance, something that the federal government might do that it controls would be taxes. And there are certain taxes reserved for the federal government, but each state has their own taxes as well, and they set them at different amounts, and the money collected by both the federal and the states would go towards different things. So that's just one example of how there's power shared between both. They might do the same type of thing, but there are differences between it. So the basic principles of our government is that there were three branches of government created. Okay, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And this is all based on James Madison's Virginia Plan. James Madison went to the Constitutional Convention already doing his homework ahead of time. He went there with what was known as the Virginia Plan, named after his home state, and it called for three separate branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. So you see here, the legislative is what we call Congress, and that is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The executive is made up of the president, the vice president, and actually there could be another image down here of the president's cabinet. Those are close advisors that he chooses to be in charge of different things within our government. And then the third branch is the judicial branch, and the head of that is the Supreme Court. So first, the legislative branch, which is known as Congress. It's made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and this is where they work. This is the U.S. Capitol. If you've ever been to D.C., there's a good chance you've seen this. The House of Representatives actually works on this side of the building, and then the Senate works on this side. You can always tell if they're in session because there are flags raised when they are doing work, and if the flag is down, that means they are out of session. But either way, this is where they go to vote on issues. They both have office buildings off to the side, multiple office buildings for each. And so anyway, Congress's main job is to make laws. Okay, that's their main job in the government. They do have other things that they are responsible for, but their main focus is to make laws. This is called the House Chamber. This is where the House of Representatives meets to come vote. It's actually pretty interesting. These four panels right here, they look like wallpaper, but actually when there is a vote taking place, they light up kind of like a scoreboard, and it shows every member that's on there, and it will show what they vote for a particular thing, a bill to become a law. This right here, what you're looking at, would be a picture of the State of the Union. There's President Trump right there, and he is addressing the nation on basically what has happened over the last year. That's the State of the Union address that takes place every January. So anyway, so Congress is split up, like I said, between the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives is based on population. So the larger state is with population, the more representatives it has. So, for instance, California today has the most representatives. It has 53, I believe. Small states such as maybe Rhode Island, Wyoming actually has a very small population, even though land-wise it is large. They only have one representative. The members of the House, they serve 2-year terms. They can continue serving time in and time out as long as they keep getting voted in, but each term is 2 years. In total, there are 435 members of the House. Again, this is that House chamber. This is an older photograph because this is President Obama giving a State of the Union. It's just a different view. The term work across the aisle, if you've ever heard that, this is the aisle they're referred to. Typically, Democrats sit over on this side, and typically Republicans sit over on this side. But we'll get into political parties later on. The Senate has 2 senators no matter what. So that large state of California, again, has 2 senators. A very, very small state such as Rhode Island also has 2 senators. So remember, back to the articles, an issue they had was every state had 1 vote, each state no matter what. And that proved to be okay in some cases, but in other cases it really should have an accurate representation based on population. And this is what they tried to do with addressing Congress by being 2 different houses. They tried to have one based on population and one an equal vote, or in this case equal votes, no matter what. So in the Senate, there's the Senate chamber, very similar, although they get fancy desks. There are 100 senators because, like I said, each state has 2. So 50 states, there are 100 senators. The second branch is the executive branch, and here's the White House. It is the president, and his main job is to carry out, or in other words, enforce the laws. Some different facts about the president. They're also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, so he is in charge of the military. They can only serve 2 4-year terms at the most, and they must be a natural-born citizen of the United States, 35 years of age, and they need to have been a U.S. resident for at least 14 years. So when I say carry out the laws, what I mean is if there's a bill that goes through Congress, it passes both the House and the Senate, it'll go to the president's desk, and then the president can vote yes, it could become a law, or he can vote no, and that's called a veto. And it could go back through Congress a second time, although it's much harder at that point. The third branch is the judicial branch, and the head of that is the Supreme Court. So their job is to interpret the laws. They determine if the laws made by Congress are constitutional. What that means is that it doesn't violate any rights that are granted in the Constitution. So how they do this is if there are issues with a particular law, then they could theoretically look at that. But they don't just sit there in their time and say, oh, let's look at this law now. Okay, that checks out. That's good. They typically look at things if there are issues. In a given year, they are presented with anywhere from 8 to, I believe, 11,000 cases, and they only look at around 80. And their year typically runs about the same as a regular school year, so about September through like June. To be a Supreme Court justice, you have to be nominated by the president, and then Congress has to vote on if they think that is a fair selection or not. Some basic principles of government. What I've been kind of talking about a little bit is what's known as checks and balances. The point of checks and balances is to make sure that each branch of the government doesn't have too much power over the others. Okay? So right there's our big guy. Yep. one branch doesn't have all the power. So let me go back. Okay, so this chart shows different checks and balances that each branch has on over another. So, for instance, I said that Congress, their job is to make laws. What they can do is they present a bill to the president to become a law. A power that he has over them is he can veto that bill trying to become a law. But a power that they have back over him is they can try to vote things through again that were originally vetoed by him. If they present him with a bill and he says no, they can vote it. It is tougher the second time. They need more votes. And usually a lot of time has been removed or has taken place. But if they get it back through Congress the second time, it becomes a law no matter what, even though he originally said no. So that's an example of a law, or a power that they have over him. A power that the judicial branch has over legislative is they can declare laws unconstitutional. The court can also declare something that the president does as unconstitutional. So they have different powers over them. A power that he has over the court is he nominates judges, but a power that the legislative branch has over the president is they have to approve of that nomination. So I think you're kind of getting the picture that they all have little things that they can do, but the other branches have abilities to kind of step in if needed. So there you have it. There's our three branches of government, just in a nutshell what they do, and some of the powers that they have over each other with checks and balances.